Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the greatest recordings ever. And today we're talking about Bruckner's Symphony No. 3. It's a good one, so the horses are in the stables. For those of you who don't know what that means, go have a look at some of my bad Bruckner reviews. Anyway, here's the bottom line. Bruckner's Symphony No. 3 is a tricky beast. A very, very tricky beast because it exists in 3 major versions, plus a few extras, extra movements and things. But in the main, there is the original version. Then there's the revised original version that's cut down a bit and rescored, which is really more important than the cuts, actually. And then there's the last version, which is the one that gets played most of the time, which is the worst of all of them because it completely destroys the finale, which is it's just awful. Anyway, the bottom line is that for Bruckner Third, you really, you know me, I'm not a big version thing. We know which versions Bruckner preferred. Bruckner preferred the second version, the revised version of the third, and it's very, very good. And it has a lot of that revised orchestration that makes it sound sort of more mature Bruckner-like, with bigger brass climaxes and more sort of regimented rhythms and things. And it's a little bit more massive than the original version. But the original version is very long. It has Wagner quotations, which I've never really noticed or cared about. I mean, they're there, but I mean, they make no difference. He took them out, actually, when he revised it, more or less. But the bottom line is that this particular choice is of the first version. And I have reasons for thinking you really need to have 2 versions of the Third Symphony, including the first version and then Bruckner's final voluntary revision, as opposed to the ones that were, done partly by the Schwach brothers and all that. And we're not having a discussion about it. We're not having an argument. This is critics' fiat. Those are the 2 versions you need. If you have anything to say about that last version, go away. Don't do it. I'm deleting the comments. Just to tell you right now, we're not getting into a Bruckner thing here at all. Anyway, the reason the first version is important, in my view, is that, first of all, it is the first symphony where you understand that you've got a guy who's operating on a totally different time scale from earlier composers. The first symphony is very nicely proportioned and works perfectly well for what it is. The second is kind of a mess, quite frankly. It sounds too long for its material. It really is. I think you could argue about that, of course, but I mean, that's how I feels. But the third is a cosmic organism that's really new and exciting. And I think that even though Bruckner hadn't quite worked out all of the proportions and given, in the revision, what he does is he gives his themes a stronger profile, so that they have more impact as you move from section to section. Here, everything in this version is a little bit blurrier. For example, just the first big unison, the revised version that we know well is ya da da dum, but the first time you hear it in this version, it's ya da da, like that. But you have more of a feeling of shape and structure and architecture in the revised version. But that's okay, because those are fairly small things. What you also have is extraordinarily long and big thematic groups. In this particular performance, which is Georg Tintner, who's the orchestra in this one. Anyway, I'll tell you who's doing it. It really is a fabulous performance. Tintner was one of those sort of unknown, cranky German conductors who, well, he wasn't really sort of German, Austrian, whatever he was, wound up, I think, in Australia. This is with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, which plays marvelously. And they have a great brass section, which is what matters. He was like sort of unknown, but he was a Bruckner specialist. Terrible being a Bruckner specialist. It's like specializing in making tripe. You know what I mean? It's like, Anyway, I mean, if I wanted to specialize in something, it would not be Bruckner. It would be like, Debussy or something with a little bit more glitz and glamour. Anyway, never mind. He was terribly austere, and he actually committed suicide, which is very sad. So he obviously had some issues. And he had his 15 minutes of fame when Naxos asked him to do a Bruckner cycle, which was his life's ambition, and he did it. And he did it very well. I mean, they're beautiful performances for the most part. He picked some of the earlier editions, unfortunately, like at the 8th. But the original version of the third, it was an inspired choice. And my goodness, it's a 77-minute long performance. The first movement alone is 30 minutes. But it doesn't sound slow because, first of all, it's the music that's longer. It's not just the tempos, but also because he lets it breathe. It has a shape. It has its own momentum, and he captures it. He captures it extraordinarily well. It's wonderfully played, and it's very exciting when the music gets going and gets whooped up and whatnot. And it is very interesting and instructive to hear how Bruckner first imagined these enormous symphonic shapes that gave him so much trouble, later in his career. And he finally, after the Fourth Symphony, he basically worked it out. He did have that one little blip with the original version of the 8th, but that wasn't so much a length issue as it was an overall conception of the work type thing. And so this version of the third, the original version of the third, with Georg Tintner and the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, is, I think, the high point of this cycle. It's one of the greatest recordings ever of the work and in the Bruckner discography. I mean, there's no question about it. It's an extraordinarily compelling, powerful, individual performance. It gives the third that unique character that you always want to hear when you have the work of a great artist, a great composer, who was so insecure and had so many issues. And I think it really redeems his initial vision. On the whole, I think he was right to do the revision. Like I said, I think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, and the fact that it's 15 minutes or 20 minutes shorter is always you don't miss it. You don't miss what isn't there, but you also do enjoy what is there in the original version. And so that's what I suggest. If you love Bruckner, if you love the Third Symphony, or if you don't know the Third Symphony, and you want to encounter, Bruckner in his most raw originality as a young, well, he wasn't young, he was like in his 50s or something when he started writing symphonies, his 40s, but as a budding symphonist of extraordinary mean, then you got to hear this version, Tintner's version of the third. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.